awakening, the neurocircuitry of awakening is everything the Buddha was talking about. And I'm not trying to point to any type of religion here. This is not religion at all. This is brain hacking. You can go through the same exact experience that typically triggered you and have no trigger. This is the core of our being, and everything we do in life is really about achieving one of those three things: joy, bliss, happiness.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Finding Equilibrium. And today I am with probably one of my favorite people, certainly part of the one of my favorite teams. We have Constantine Georgiou, who is a co-founder of a really interesting business called the Conscious Accelerator. And today we're going to learn more about it, because the Conscious Accelerator has been in development for, it feels like a long time, but Constantine is here to share more about exactly what it is and why so many more people can actually benefit. So welcome, Constantine. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm all right. Yes, no, I'm good. It's getting cold here in Sydney, so I'm adjusting to the to the new temperature. I've got like 3 layers on or so, but you're looking very snug there as well, I have to say.
Yeah. It is getting a bit colder, but I, just really present to the grace of the fact that we're living in Australia and the benefits of all these things that we take for granted. And when you look at some other nations at the moment that are struggling much more than we are.
I completely agree. So today I really wanted to bring you on again to talk more about the Conscious Accelerator. So we had a really interesting chat, which is available, and I'll put that in the notes, which is more about your background and your journey to the Conscious Accelerator. But today I'd love to just really dig more into it to really understand what the Conscious Accelerator is. I mean, we're at an interesting point in history where so much has changed, and a lot of people are looking to make sense, looking for more meaning of what's really happening, more meaning in their lives. And I'd love to understand more about the Conscious Accelerator, and maybe we can start there in terms of what is the Conscious Accelerator.
Yeah, thank you. And the Conscious Accelerator is really about accelerating our level of consciousness or awareness, awakening, enlightenment associated with the everyday life. So, where what I've realized after many years in industry in Australia, whether it's in the technology space, transformation space, and in the startup space as the head of venture capital in many different roles, and is that, it's the workplace is still the leading cause of suffering in the world. I'm sorry. As much as we try really hard, and it's not just the workplace, there's a lot of other contexts as well, but the Conscious Accelerator is trying to basically modernize ancient wisdom practices in the context of everyday life and workplace to be able to improve the way we collaborate, we innovate, and envision a future together. And all these words are quite a little bit hyperbole and probably overused, but the one thing that's different about us is we're not giving you more tools. It's not about more tools. Sure, there are tools to quantify the impact, but really it's about trying to show that there's another way of achieving effortless performance, effortless joy, happiness, and in some cases bliss. And I know some of these words might be a little bit out there for a lot of people, but I would ask you to check in with your heart and really kind of lean into the fact that this is the core of our being, and everything we do in life is really about achieving one of those three things: joy, bliss, happiness. I'm not going to dive into this too much, but I do have about 20 odd slides to run through, if that would be of any value.
I think it would be great. I mean, what you've just said, I don't think anyone can say we don't want joy or we don't want bliss or we don't want happiness. So those three things, it's more around how do you get them. And when you describe there's a different way of doing it, I think it's going to be very beneficial to look at the slides and understand more about the work that you've done to help people achieve those outcomes.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I'll share my screen. And you can see my screen. Yep.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So this is a little presentation that I was asked to give after a period of. This answers the question, the why question as to why the Conscious Accelerator, and I've titled it From Lockdown to Liberation. And I don't want to be insensitive for some people who are struggling and saying, how dare you talk about that kind of stuff right now? The reality is that this is exactly what we need to be talking about, because otherwise we're giving too much power to our old way of being. And the reality is, in my experience, and I've stress tested this to the nth degree, especially since trying to pursue those three end goals of joy, bliss, happiness, and high performance and success, that everything we were looking for is already here. And I mean, I'm going to take you through a journey in terms of how I arrived at this. And you got to understand, this is coming from a lot of exposure to a lot of startups, a lot of businesses, a lot of contexts where we've been able to apply these concepts and seen the economic benefits, the financial benefits, the relational benefits, and the personal benefits for people's lives. So I believe, after a lot of exposure, that fundamental well-being, we'll just use that term right now to capture the joy, bliss, happiness aspect. Fundamental well-being for no reason is a competitive advantage. When there's more joy and there's more bliss and there's more happiness, I'm actually more creative. It's counter to the old management paradigms that we've been told about in life and society and in commerce. Having been the head of venture capital in various roles, I've seen what works and what doesn't work. So I'm going to roll over to a little bit about myself. I love venturing. I love innovation. I love startups and entrepreneurs who basically lean into solving serious and meaningful problems. I've also been a champion of human potential with regards to transformational projects in the top 100 companies in Australia and government departments, having built my own transformation business called Veltio, which was acquired by a US large organization, and Salesforce.com invested in. So, I actually achieved the success that, inverted commas, the success that people had pointed to as being, then you can live happily ever after. But the reality was that after that success, I did not feel at all like I was happily ever after. In fact, it really got me to a point where I started to notice that the whole model is broken. So more efforting and more achieving through an ordinary way of knowing and the way we've been schooled, educated, and managed isn't working, doesn't work. And look, I call myself a warrior of light because I've been through quite a lot of traumas in my life, and somehow I still have an innate innocence and an innate love of human potential and human beings. And I know that all we're going to do is shift our level of consciousness to be more global centric at scale, to be able to enable the world to shift. These transformations that we're seeing are inevitable. Change is the only constant. It's how we pursue or perceive the change that makes the difference. So I'm just going to take you on a little bit of a journey in terms of that includes my path over the last many years, but mainly in the last 12 months, because the lockdown gave me an opportunity to go deep on a 10-week self-isolated retreat. And at the beginning, I had burnout, cognitive dissonance, stress, anxiety, heart palpitations even, always tired, and all, monkey mind, which we can all relate to, restlessness, poor communication, felt contracted and pressured, let alone the poor sleep. And I think we can all relate to that. So I decided after being told that I can, I'm only going to work 2 days a week for the next period of time, I thought, why don't I run a 10-week self-isolated retreat for the next 10 weeks and get myself a number of teachers. So I ended up getting doubling down on my already amazing kinesiology based guide, Ian Haycroft. He's my blind spotter. And it's a little bit of a divine story in terms of how I found my Tibetan Buddhist and biofeedback teacher, Stephen Altair, who I consider a lama, and then spent a lot of time digesting and consuming everything that Locke Kelly put out, which is a modernized Mahamudra teacher, which is based on the Tibetan Buddhist practices. And what I discovered after my first experience or my first glimpse with Locke and the profound shift that happened literally in 3 minutes, I went, oh, this is real. There's something here. I built a 10-week retreat plan that looked like this on a daily basis. It was pretty intense. I started to use a lot of neurotechnology to quantify to reprogram my brain in terms of training my brain to have better concentration with the Muse headset, which most people would be familiar with. Use the Aura ring to manage to quantify or measure my heart rate variability, sleep, and readiness levels. Learned a lot more about resilience and developing resilience through the PR6 model. Basically, became a little bit of a student neuroscientist, and you see some of the graphs that I used to be able to identify progress and brain entrainment with the neorhythm, which is basically amplifying the brain in different modalities for different purposes, whether that's sleep, pain relief, hyper focus, or open monitoring type meditations. I'm going to jump to the next one, but basically what I discovered after my first week of using my Muse headset, and on average, my baseline looks something like this. And typically for most people, this is an average graph. It shows high alpha, which means you're calm. As a subjective experience, you see that on the bottom left, calm, focused, and some timelessness. But at a quantified perspective, a subjective perspective, it was really good to be able to see these things. And, typically there's meditations where 40 minutes or so. And this is beyond mindfulness, I must say. These are practices. There's another 3 or 4 gateways beyond just mindfulness. But mindfulness as concentration is really important. I must emphasize that. It's a building block. To 8 weeks later, experiencing the following. Basically, in 8 weeks, my brain became activated, and you can see from the bottom section there, the subjective experience was waves of bliss, joy, a feeling of embodiment, spacious, a feeling of non-locality, non-duality, and no time. Felt very renewed. And where these peaks happen is in terms of the brain cohesion, there was an emptiness of self, which was a little bit hard to describe. It is hard to describe, but it is very affirming. And in fact, I reckon half an hour of this is equivalent to a night's sleep.
Wow, that's incredible. That incredible change.
Yeah. 2 weeks later, super high gamma across the brain, that with some cohesion on the way up and cohesion on the way down. The critical difference here is a little bit longer meditation, but the access to insight. And only in the last few, let's say 15 years, have they discovered that actually, when they were doing neurofeedback and neuroscience studies in the 70s, they thought gamma waves was just noise. They didn't understand the relevance of it. But gamma is like the head of the orchestra. It creates cohesion across the brain and is basically one of the many early indications of enlightenment. I'm not saying I'm enlightened, no way. but I can access awakened states. I'm no special. In fact, I have lots of reasons why I'm not special, thanks to the past. But if I can have these experiences and in 10 weeks change my brain, thanks to neuroplasticity, the biggest insight that I had was that the brain is much more plastic than we actually originally thought, than I originally thought. But the insight that you get from here, where you seemingly connect multiple points of knowledge to see patterns and get insights, was totally amazing, let alone the experience of bliss in these states. So I think I might just pause there for a sec, but fundamentally, some people may say that's really interesting on the cushion, very good, 40-minute meditation, full bliss. But the thing that I'm really keen about right now is because, anyone can download an app and do a mindfulness-based meditation. The two key things that are different here. One is that these practices are not mindfulness-based meditations. They are totally different, that incorporate spacious awareness, local awareness, simultaneous awareness, and Rigpa, or heart-mind, to be able to then shift the way we perceive, know, and identify. That is the key difference and is the key why behind the Conscious Accelerator.
Right.
We're shifting the view. We're helping you identify differently, understand and know differently, and therefore create differently. And to quote Einstein, who said, we can't change a problem or fix a problem that from the same level of consciousness that created it. This is what he's talking about.
Okay, this is wonderful. Can I stop you there? Because I'm sure a lot of our viewers are going to have lots of questions at this point. So what you've shown us is like super impressive. It's 10 weeks for a significant change. I'm curious. So one question that I'm curious about is, does it matter where someone's starting point? So if you could take anybody who was in a deep state of stress and trying to balance all the balls and running a business, trying to balance family life and kids, all of the rest of it, could you take a person like that, put them through the Conscious Accelerator program with the view that they would, if they do the work, and I'm curious just to understand what the work is, that they would come out experiencing some of the things that you've described in terms of bliss and happiness and joy.
Yeah, look, the question here is the answer. The direct answer is yes. The question is, for what period of time? For how long does it abide for? Can you take it off the... This is the second point. The first point was a shift in view. The second point is off the cushion in daily life, in the midst of uncertainty, in the midst of my board meeting, in the midst of getting rejected by a customer, whatever it might be. Those things that are typically triggering, to quote one of my teachers, to be able to remove the sting associated with what's happening out there. So emptying negative karmic memory traces associated with what typically triggers you. You can go through the same exact experience that typically triggered you and have no trigger.
Yes, I really like that. And I believe in that fundamentally. And I love this word, fundamental well-being. And the point you make about the competitive advantage of that is something I haven't heard before, but that's a really, it's a very compelling argument, because if you can achieve that level of fundamental well-being by doing this work, then the benefits are huge, and you can go through the highly triggering moments without being affected in the same way that you once were.
Exactly. And so that therefore allows you to have what's a really important skill as part of the initial mindfulness concentration practice, which is called metacognition. Being able to recognize that I'm about to get triggered, or this typically triggers me, or this is a triggering environment, but noticing that this could be triggering. And then you start to recognize, oh, there's a distance between the one being triggered and the event that is triggering.
Yeah.
There's space. There's a separation between signal and noise, as some people call it. And so firstly, yes. Secondly, I've been told not to be as what's the word I'm looking for? Like, look, in a very short space of time. So far, I'd be very confident to say in 30 minutes, you can experience exactly this experience. The question is, can you retrain the brain to abide in these states ongoing? And you can, with practice, with devotion, with guidance, with support, and with technology that validates, because subjective experience of meditation, for 10 years, I thought I was a meditator until I put the muse on and I realized that I was kidding myself. It's because it's subjective, right? But it's gone from taking me quite some time to surrender to the process of biofeedback and, have a calm score of no more than 35% calm in a 10-minute practice or an hour practice, to easily, without much effort at all, having 98, 99, 100% with little practice in between. So the brain changes, is what I'm trying to tell you.
If you do it consistently.
And becomes effortless, becomes more effortless, to maintain this ground. Yeah. Would you like me to proceed further?
Proceed further. I mean, I have another question, but we can save that one for after.
Okay.
Yeah, let's continue, and then we'll
go into. Okay, I gave you the evidence up front just because I like to cut through, but then I'll tell you kind of what's going on in the world, and especially with regards to neuroscience research in the last few years, because these practices have only really been starting to get recorded in terms of the impacts on 10-year long-term practitioners from Tibet and other Eastern and Western circles have only really gone into the neuro labs in the last 5 years. So the findings are amazing. The neurocircuitry of awakening is everything the Buddha was talking about. And I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to point to any type of religion here. This is not religion at all. This is brain hacking, right? And so look, there's obvious. I don't know. I know everyone understands this, but there's a mental health crisis. There already was before COVID. The isolation issues in terms of what's happening and how we interpret through our conditioned ordinary mind, external major life changes, work, relationship difficulties, financial problems, being too busy, and children and family, which all have been exacerbated in recent times, is being scrubbed through a conditioned mind, which reacts in the following way: an inability to accept uncertainty, pessimism, negative self-talk, and unrealistic expectations and perfectionism. There's a really simple, good reason why that's the case, which I'm about to explain. You don't have to have shame and guilt associated with it. It has everything to do with the ordinary mind. The ordinary mind, the problem with the ordinary mind, if you take the mind perspective, is that mind wandering, distractibility, and a discontinuity of awareness and state leads to reactivity and therefore suffering. Because the ordinary mind, the ordinary way we're aware of our surroundings, is through the ordinary mind. And the next slide will address that a little bit more detail. And then there's the event perspective or victim-based perspective, which leads to a disorganization of unfolding experience, which causes trauma, and a scattered and elaborated mental content. Because when we operate from ordinary mind, the ground of the ordinary mind is thought, chasing thought, confirming thought, and self-referencing thought. So who we think we are is not who we truly are. And I'm not going to give you the $69 million answer to that right now. But the case for training the mind is really important, because the resting brain activates the default mode network. This is what they found, I think it was 15, 17 years ago, by accident, that when long-term meditators were asked to have a break for 10 minutes while they change something on the quantified EEG machine. They note the scientist, the lab assistant basically noticed that nothing changed in the energy patterns associated, the energy behind the brain waves. And so they discovered that there's something called the default mode network. They said, why? I told them not to meditate. And the reason for that is that what happens when you're daydreaming is you're self-referencing. Why did that happen today? What am I going to do tomorrow? Why is he looking at me this way? I wonder what my wife thinks about the dress I bought her like yesterday. All those things are I, which sound very convincing. But all it is thought acting as I, appearing to awareness. Just like hearing is appearing to awareness. Just like seeing is appearing to awareness. The difference is that the thoughts have the word I in them, or are self-referencing, which is very easy for us to be convinced into believing that I am those thoughts. In actual fact, that is not the case. And so there's a lot of studies that are showing now that, these practices around, let's say, we'll call them awareness practices, are the cut-through cheat codes, master keys to awakening that improve fundamental well-being, performance, risk-taking, innovation, collaboration, and the bottom line impacts on businesses, which we have the studies, because fundamentally what we're encouraging here is self-governance. So I'm just going to say one thing on this slide because I'm just conscious that I'm taking a bit too longer than I would have expected. I'm a bit passionate about this topic, obviously, but we spend as much as 47% of our day in mind wandering. 47% of our day confirming a false self. The default mode network is made up of these, four sections: the parietal lobe and the anterior cingulate, and we can retrain the brain to basically change the way to have a much more quieter mind. Let's just call it that, because the whole monkey mind piece is just none other than self-referential thinking, self-judgment and evaluation. And it's basically activated in the PCC, posterior cingulate cortex. This is where suffering is initiated, because we're basically going, there's something that is not enough. I'm not satisfied with the 10 tick boxes of my to-do lists today. The reason for that is that the ordinary sense of self does not exist. It cannot be satiated. And when we look for that as our identity, our way of knowing, we get into what we've all experienced: competitive nature, I'm better than you, separateness, imposter syndrome, a lack of worth. Of course, that would be the case innocently, because we're innocently believing our thoughts. I'll jump a little bit ahead here. But so why meditation? Meditation is not just relaxation therapy. It actually quietens the mind. And in this world of distraction economy, I think it's really important to understand that a peaceful mind is a happy mind. Meditation not only is not designed to address psychopathology. Meditation is about addressing the problem of everyday unhappiness. Meditation is about awakening, liberation from suffering, and understanding the real nature of our mind's awareness. In a direct experience, this is not more concepts. This is not more tools. This is a direct experience of the nature of the ground of your being. In other words, the boundless ocean of awakened awareness. And it's very difficult to discuss these topics without direct experience. And so what we do in our programs and our community programs is always try and infuse some direct experience practice so people can basically notice the quantitative quantum shift in their consciousness. The good news is this: you already have this. You already are operating from awakened awareness. Awakened awareness runs at 5 times faster than conceptual awareness. Conceptual awareness runs at 500 milliseconds to reality, whereas awakened awareness runs at 1/100th of a second. So in fact, you're much faster, much quicker. And when you start to ruminate about what something should have done or how something should be, you're in conceptual awareness. And so, the thing about awakened awareness, it's always here, but it's clouded over by seeming substantial constructions of the mind. So emptiness removes clouds systematically. So, let's practice, basically. And there are many stages of emptiness: the ordinary stages of self, phenomena, and time, and then extraordinary: duality, limiting schemas, and informational processing bias, to the point where you could have an experience of reality where you're sitting right now without any of those 6 layers. And you may say, why would I want to do that? It doesn't sound very functional. And my response is, having experienced it directly myself, not theoretically, is that the ground of your being is none other than potentiality, love, joy, and bliss. And that is mind-boggling. Why? I don't know why. I don't want to get too ethereal here, but that's the experience. And then from there, you may ask the question, well, how does this affect me as a leader? How does it affect me as an entrepreneur? Well, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that your ability to attract great talent goes exponentially higher if you're an awakened leader, right? You become much more pliant for product market fitness. You become a lot more empathic with what's actually happening versus going through the default mode network or biases of how it should be. You're actually working out of what is actually happening. And so if you're starting a business or running a business or leading a business, those things are very important. And if you're working out of what we call heart mind, you're infinitely compassionate and loving, and you're able to allow people to speak their truth, have a culture of safety and inclusion. And the last time I checked, those organizations who are very successful are the ones who actually foster that kind of environment. So just conscious of time. There's been a lot of protocol developments. You'll learn a lot about these in our upcoming course. But fundamentally, mental health is to knowledge workers as physical health is to laborers. And, there's a lot of programs in place to take care of physical health for laborers, but, and there's more and more mental health solutions being put in place. But no one really talks about it at a very deep level. It's not just about having an app. It's also about having devotion to practices that get us there faster. And we need to know it's not suitable for everyone. But, I'm very passionate about what is the minimum viable effort to get the maximum amount of result to help people shift into a much more response-able sense of mind.
Yes.
Because you know what? Leadership is suffering. It's a lonely sport. And the data from 2017, let alone in the most recent years, 93% of employees surveyed believe that their stressed leaders are ineffective in leading their teams. In fact, only 11% of employees with stressed leaders are highly engaged at work. 11%. So if you're freaking out at work, the impact runs deep. When leaders fail to manage their stress in a constructive way, more than 50% of the employees perceive their leader as harmful or ineffective. Yet when leaders actively engage in mindfulness practices, just as mindfulness alone for the benefit of metacognition, recognizing your emotions, the psychological capital of an organization rises, such as hope, optimism, self-efficacy, and resilience.
Yes.
So it would seem that, some of these things are soft skills, but the soft skills and the subtleness of these skills are the most important.
Yes, this is really interesting. Let's just pause here because it's interesting to use that word soft skills, because in many ways these are the hardest skills, because they're like the foundation for good leadership. And this study was done in 2017. Of course, over the last year, we've seen that leaders have to look after themselves, but also everybody else. I mean, that's the fundamental challenge, and it's hard enough looking after yourself during a period of huge change. But you've also got to be there for everyone else, and everyone's going through the same things. Everyone's problem is your problem. So it feels like this isn't a negotiable skill set. It's something that that becomes part of a leadership training program. I know increasingly in the world that you've come from, that kind of startup world, when you look at the mental health statistics of founders, it's horrendous. It's really bad, because often we're not prepared for this. We jump into running a new business because it sounds exciting, or we take on a department, but unless we're actually guided and develop let's call it self-care skills, if you like. But you can see here that has such a huge ripple effect on the entire organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is great. This is really good. Thank you.
Yeah. And but not to blow my horn too much, but 4 months after my 10-week retreat, self-isolated retreat, my brain continued to show amazing results. So
that's interesting. That was one of my questions. Like, did it go back to where it started? But that's
cool. No,
so you created a new
it's a new baseline
level.
That's
wonderful.
And the biggest thing is that we get, if you have a look at all the amazing new breakthroughs in trauma work and collective trauma work, the biggest thing is you go from your ordinary way of contracting, and when you contract with stress, with what shouldn't be happening, with arguing, you argue with reality, and you argue with your colleagues, and you argue with your team, and it's just not going to end up well, right? But with these practices, you can actually, instead of doing that, more effortlessly expand to include whatever the negative news is, include VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that sounds pretty scary for some people, but don't you need more information when VUCA happens versus less information?
Yeah.
And then finally, just to we'll talk about the virtual accelerator program that's launching next month called Enlightened Leadership. It's a bespoke platform program specifically for leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs. It runs for 10 weeks. It's 2-hour weekly sessions with guided, unique protocols, quantified progress. We're partnering with neurotechnology partners. So that comes as part of the program, and we're building a community of seekers to become finders of their fundamental well-being. So the consciousaccelerator.com is where you can register for if you're interested. We've got a bit of an intake program, but fundamentally we're accelerating enlightenment in humanity through leadership transformation, neurotechnology, and cutting-edge protocols.
It's amazing. So what type of person would really benefit? Any leader? So a leader who is in a big organization, small organization?
Any leader. There's no difference. I mean, look, we're starting there, but fundamentally we're building enlightened leader. This is the Enlightened Leadership program, where we've got an enlightened self. We're building an enlightened youth program.
Oh, okay.
As well, where we will be taking some of these to different phases and stages of people's life. So, we've even been asked to do something for death and dying, right?
Okay.
Because it's very stressful, obviously.
Yeah.
So, but if we can help, this is not just myself. I'm the, person who's seen the impact of these protocols off the cushion in the workplace. Have been sharing with lots of executives in some of the largest organizations my journey with the charts that I shared today, and they're all blown away. And typically their feedback is, yeah, I need it and I need it now.
So, which I think everyone would react like that, because the problem that you highlight is very acute and is getting worse rather than better in many ways. What is the work? So the Conscious Accelerator program is 10 weeks. I'm curious in terms of the work that you did. You showed one of your slides for people who are watching. You highlighted your kind of what you did every day for the 10 weeks. Does some of that get integrated into the actual program itself? Like,
yes, it does. Yeah. So the program is an integration of, as I said before, we call them modern wisdom practices. Because what worked for the Buddha 2,500 years ago may not work for us today, because he didn't have a mobile phone.
I like that, modern wisdom. Let's call you. We have new technologies.
and we've got unique requirements, but the fundamental baseline of the North Star is the same North Star. And I don't consider the Buddha to have, like, he was the first neuroscientist, right? He explored everything to the nth degree, hedonism, poverty, everything, until he just, committed himself to be devoted to sit under the Bodhi tree and say, I'm not leaving here until, I find the answer. And he found it. And then since then, if you have a look at per capita, the Tibetans will probably have the most number of enlightened humans per capita than any place in the world. There's got to be a reason for that. And the other thing that's unique, and everyone needs to understand this, is that texts that have been discovered in caves and monasteries have just in the last 5 to 10 years been translated into English. So we've now got getting access to them. That has permeated into an ecosystem of educators, trainers, teachers, beyond just the lamas. The lamas are obviously very important. But then you've got these, the long-term effects of these practitioners. It's like, what is the long-term effects of this practice? Mahamudra, Dzogchen, right? And then, there's an opportunity to kind of, and then with these modernized teachers, these modern teachers who've been turning them into 5 to 10 minute glimpse practices to give you fundamental relief or refuge in the midst of chaos. And then other practices that basically allow you to stay in the practice with it as I talk to you right now. So, one of the things that I've been practicing is, as I'm, conscious that, right now, if I was to be very transparent, I'm conscious of time. I'm conscious of trying to get the message out. That creates some level of restriction. Well, that in itself, and welcoming that, is interesting, because my awareness is already including it. So all of a sudden I can include that awareness, and you'll notice a change in my demeanor. And eyes open, no need for eyes closed, lotus pose. And then really I can see metacognition coming online, and I can see that I can now choose my words to be more in the moment, present, on purpose, versus a script that I've given many times before. And then all of a sudden I look around and awakened awareness comes online, and I have a little bit more joy, a little bit more happiness. And then you're probably feeling me connecting in with you, because now I care more about the relational field. So this is possible.
That's wonderful. So the 10 weeks, so you mentioned 2 hours a week.
2 hours a week, yeah.
Yeah, and what gets covered in those 2 hours?
Yeah. So, what we're covering is the neuroscience of this approach. We define what is an enlightened leader, get into the measurements of the 8 and what the impact is can be on your business across the 8 dynamic measures of business success. Then we go through and conceptually, every module has some education, but is very heavily practice-based.
Got it.
So discovering the self, who you truly are, discovering natural mind. So the actual headings are on, the module headings are on the website. living your realization. So how do you take these practices off the cushion? Understanding the ghosts in the machine. So this is really about taking advantage of some of the amazing technologies around things like kinesiology to understand that conscious patterns forward you, unconscious patterns run you. So what are the patterns that get in the way? Because those are the obscurations. And this is what I'm saying, that we're learning how to remove or unpeel the obscurations. Then we move into awakened problem solving. So we problem solve from awake awareness. That's a direct experience practice. Then we, the next module, we talk about awakened organizational culture. How do you bring these ways of being into the organization? And what is the benefit at a cultural level and an effectiveness and productivity level, such as flow? There's a lot of discussions at the moment we're having with many organizations around flow, because flow is becoming really sexy and it's great, task flow. But we're actually talking about life flow. How do you stay in life flow all the time? And then how to stabilize your awakened organization. And then there's then the final one is basically bringing it all together. And look, our co-founders are either scientists or HR executives or serial entrepreneurs in the education space with Tibetan Buddhist backgrounds. John King, who you've interviewed all of our co-founders, which is great. Thank you for that. John King, who's the author, one of the co-authors of Tribal Leadership, and has been a transformational leadership coach for many years, some of the biggest companies in the world and education organizations in the US. And so he ties it all together. He ties it all together by talking about, life as a work of art.
I love that.
Yeah.
Life is a work of art. Wow.
But everyone will basically walk away understanding how to train the brain. What does it feel like to have a direct experience of the ground of their being? How to apply it in all the most often contexts in work, problem solving, leadership, call coming, leadership, decision making, problem solving, and to be able to be a much more capable leader that creates effortlessly. The effortless piece is really important to understand. Effort comes from from the false sense of identity.
Yes.
Because I have to change something, because it is never satisfied. The first two things that I typically hear from people after a 30-minute glimpse practice, as an example, is, I feel enough. I feel content. And then the other one is that I feel like I can do anything.
Yeah.
And some people would say, isn't that a bad thing? I don't want people to feel enough. When I want them to feel I need to crack the whip, right? I've already had the executive say that to me. I said, yes. Are you serious? When was the last? So you're telling me you need to manage people, yeah? Into shaping them up into a certain thing, yeah? I mean, I'm not going to attack your ego, but I'll just say, let me ask you a question. And I love you, Mr. Executive, Miss Executive. When was the last time you liked to be managed?
It's so interesting, isn't it? I'm sure no one said all the time. It strikes me listening to you speak is that we've all got to unlearn so much of what we've learned. If you've grown up with traditional leadership training, these are the things that you're taught, and now suddenly a lot of those things have been proven through science that they're no longer effective over time. That we've got to unlearn those things. And I liked one of the things that you said during the presentation is that everything we're looking for is already here. I think that's such a interesting thing, because it highlights the fact that we've already got these skills. It's just we don't know that they exist, and what you're doing is helping people to awaken. I like this concept of the awakened leader is able to recognize and almost use both sides of their brain to be able to achieve the outcomes that they're seeking, because ultimately people are looking for joy, happiness, what was the other joy?
Joy, bliss, and happiness.
Bliss and happiness.
So you know, the short pitch that you know, having been in the game, in the startup game for a while, you know, pitching is part of the game. So it's really simple. Like I had suffering for no reason all the time, no matter what, even after having all the successes. And you know, the joys of those successes lasted 5 minutes, right? Because then the other problems were created with more resources and whatever. To joy, bliss, a little bit of joy, a little bit of bliss, lots of happiness for no reason all the time.
Which is cool, which is wonderful. Anyway, Constantine, I feel we could talk about this for the next 3 hours, but I'm conscious of time and we need to wrap things up. But thank you so much for taking us through the Conscious Accelerator. Remind people where they can sign up for the Enlightened Leader, and when are the other programs coming through? So you mentioned the Enlightened Self.
Yeah, we'll be releasing the next ones in the next 3 months. One a month, but we're currently taking intakes. There's a registration page on the website called theconsciousaccelerator.com.
Okay.
And then we're setting up discovery calls with people to make sure that we understand where they're coming from. They can understand what to expect. So we're taking a very non-scalable tech approach to most to most tech companies. You know, we're online learning for now, but once everything comes out, we'll be running big retreats, and we're really big on building a community. One of the biggest things that we've identified as a result of the pandemic is that people just want to connect at the heart level, and they want other people that they can feel safe with. You know, and we've run small groups called Refuge in the Midst, which basically allows people to come in with their problems. 15-20 minutes later, they can't find the problem.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that.
Like, it's amazing.
Wonderful. Well, best of luck with the Conscious Accelerator and the first intake. And you know, I'd love to be part of it myself, but we'll have a look at that. So
you will be.
Let me again acknowledge you and the whole team for everything you've done. I mean, it's an incredible journey that you've been on, and thank you for sharing that with us. And we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Take care, Constantine.
Thank you for everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye now.